All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I work for the South Carolina Education Association and the National Education Association. And before we get started tonight, I just want to shout out to the SCEA. And if you are not currently a member, we invite you to join our movement at jointhescea.org. And when you join the SCEA, you're not just joining a South Carolina association, you're also joining the largest labor union in the United States with over 3 million members and lots of amazing benefits and lots of great connections that you can make as an educator to other educators around the country, helping to move our profession forward locally, nationally, and at the state level. And so we'd love to have you as a part of the movement. And tonight's session is brought to you by the SCEA and NEA. So let's get started. Podcasting. It's so much fun and it's so much easier than it used to be. I did some podcasting when I was teaching, and this was back like 15 years ago, probably around 2006, 7 is when I started doing some podcasting with my students. And at that time, it was kind of complicated. Like there was a lot of stuff you needed to know about RSS feeds. And it was challenging. You could do it, but it was challenging. And now a lot of the stuff that was challenging about creating a podcast has become super easy, especially with the way our cell phones are so much more powerful than they were 15 years ago. And with the advent of new applications that make some of the complicated parts a lot easier. So we're going to go over today how you can start a podcast. And the idea here is if you want to start a podcast as an educator, that you have a voice and that you learn to share it, but also to bring this to your students and help have them create podcasts, because if they have a cell phone, they can create a podcast. So let's go ahead and share my screen and jump right into it. I try to start with the why, right? So why podcasting? I'm going to skip this. This is my grandparents, by the way. I did this for a session that I did. And there's this thing called My Heritage. You could take this photo of your this is a photo of my grandfather. So I guess I will share this. This is a photo of my grandfather. And this is him. He was in World War I. And you could take, I never met him. He died in the 60s before I was born. And so I got this photo, and this is my favorite photo of him. And I took it and I put it in this like AI thing, and it animated him. So it was really strange to see my grandfather, who I'd never met, and I'd never seen a video of him either. And to see him move like that. And I did that same thing. This is his wife, my grandmother. And I took this photo and had it move. And you could take these old photos of your grandfather. This is my maternal grandfather, who was in World War II. And this is my maternal grandmother, and this is a photo of her. And both of my grandfathers had passed away before I was born. My granny here that you see, she passed away when I was about 5. So it was really cool to see them in motion like that. Doesn't really have anything to do with podcasting, but if you're interested in doing it, you can go to myheritage.com/deep-nostalgia. All right. So today we're going to look at what is a podcast, how you consume podcasts, how to develop it, how to interview. We'll see how much time we have. We're going to go till 8 o'clock. I'll stick around for anybody who has questions. We're going to look at the type of equipment you need, the software you need, and then also how to publish your podcast. So that's basically the agenda tonight. So getting back to why do we podcast? So this is a picture of someone that you may not have heard of, but her name is Sophie Scholl. Very relevant from today's current events. So Sophie Scholl was a young woman living in Germany when Hitler and the Nazis came into power. And she and her brother and some friends saw the evil that they were doing and started to write these pamphlets and started sending them anonymously around the country. And they would create copies of these anti-Nazi pamphlets, and they would go into universities and they would take these stacks of papers, and while the students were in class, they would leave them in this like a central location, and then they would run out. So they would just kind of drop them, and then the students would come out of class and see these pamphlets and read them. One day, I think they were at the University of Munich, and one day they were dropping off a stack and she got caught. And I think it was the custodian saw her and caught her, and she was arrested. She was actually taken into custody. And there's a wonderful documentary you can read. You can watch the German documentary about Sophie Scholl. But she was taken in and she was interrogated, and they tried to break her. They tried to get her to sort of go against what it is that she believed in. And this is a quote from her. So I shared this with my students. She said, "The real damage is done by those millions who want to survive. The honest men who just want to be left in peace. Those who don't want their little lives disturbed by anything bigger than themselves. Those with no sides and no causes. Those who won't take measure of their own strength for fear of antagonizing their own weakness. Those who don't like to make waves or enemies. Those for whom freedom, honor, truth, and principles are only literature. Those who live small, mate small, die small. It's the reductionist approach to life. If you keep it small, you'll keep it under control. If you don't make any noise, the boogeyman won't find you. But it's all an illusion because they die too. Those people who roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe from what? Life is always on the edge of death. Narrow streets lead to the same places as wide avenues, and a little candle burns itself out just like a flaming torch does. I choose my own way to burn." So this is my daughter, and her name is Sophie Scholl. So I named my daughter after this heroine, Sophie Scholl, because I wanted her. I knew when she got older, she would Google her name and she would wonder, why was I named Sophie Scholl? And when she reads the story of Sophie Scholl, I'm hoping that she's inspired to always have the strength to use her own voice, to speak up for justice, and to use whatever means she has to do that. And so I share this story with you tonight, and I share this story with my students because what I want us to think about is the fact that we live in a country that has more freedom than those in Nazi Germany had. And we also live in a world now in 2022 where we have access to tools that are far more powerful than photocopying a bunch of pamphlets and having to type up the pamphlet on a typewriter and make, I guess, I don't know if they use mimeographs or whatever, however they made copies back then. But we have, like just tonight, as an example, you have any one of you could get on and do a Facebook live stream. We can create videos and put them on YouTube. We can create podcasts. We can create websites. And now the entire world has access to our voice, potentially. And so one of the things my students did is they created this video. We created this little 4-minute video and we posted it to YouTube. And it was about some of the changes we wanted to see in the education system. And about a month or two, maybe after that video was posted to YouTube, we got a letter, and it was from Turkey, from Istanbul, Turkey. And they were holding an international education conference in Turkey, and they saw our video and they wanted to use our video as the kickoff video, sort of like the keynote video to get the conference started. And they were asking our permission to use it. So now when I went to talk to my students and I said, look, you guys made this video and look what's happening. Like somebody on the other side of the planet wants to use it. It's making an impact. Now, what happens the next time I ask my students to create content? Well, they're not just creating content for me, right? Because traditionally, like we ask for an assessment, we have a student create something, whether it's a paper or document or something that they're turning in. And maybe there's a rubric and I'm assigning a grade to it. But basically, I'm the only audience for it, right? I mean, they're going to put blood, sweat, and tears into a 10-page paper, and one human being is going to read it. I want you to think about that, like from the student's perspective. It's like I'm putting all of this time and effort, and one human being is going to receive that work and evaluate it and give it back to me, and then it's done. Like, why did I do all that work? But if you think about a podcast or a video or a website or something like that, now you potentially have a global audience. And something could go viral. We had one of our videos that had that my students created had over 250,000 views the last time I checked. You have the potential to have that global audience. And now students, there's a different type of motivation. It's not just, the rubric's still there, the grade's still there. I'm going to still look at it. but now they have the potential of impacting the world in a positive way. The other thing is our students are already doing that, right? Our students are already creating TikTok videos and YouTube videos, and they're, they're trying, many of them trying to be quote unquote influencers, whatever. But our students are already creating content. So the question is, are we guiding them in ways that they can create content that perhaps is a little bit more meaningful? And not that I have anything against like doing a little dance or making a silly, funny little video for TikTok, but can we get students to be thinking like Sophie Scholl did? Like, what are you passionate about? What do you really care about? What about issues of justice what are some things that are personal to you? What are some things in the world that you care about? And how can you use your voice to make the world a better place? So how can we create content that improves the world around us, whether it's our community, our state, our country, our world? What is it that we can say to try to make the world a better place, to inspire and influence other people to do good things? And when you combine those elements of trying to make the world a better place and having an audience that actually, where you can actually truly make an impact, it brings more relevance to the work, and it gives students more motivation to put their effort into it and to care into it and to care about it more than just the grade that they're going to receive, but the impact that they can make with it. So this is Sophie Scholl's side by side. I think they look a little bit like they could be related, huh? So the other story I tell about why, and then we'll get into the technical stuff, because I know that's some of you here for that. Real quick, this is a guy's name, Mohamed Waziri, and I won't go into the whole story, but basically he was a Tunisian a citizen who would walk into town with fruits and produce to sell. And he wound up having his stuff confiscated. He was very poor, orphaned at a young age, trying to make a living for himself. And there were corrupt officials in the town, and his cart got confiscated, and he protested, and he tried to go the right route to tell his story and get his stuff back. And he just was met with what he felt was a lot of corruption and so forth. Well, whatever you believe about that story, what happened, that the details of that story aren't as important as what happened afterwards. So in protest, Mohamed Waziri, this guy here, this Tunisian guy, went to the middle of the street and set himself on fire. He poured gasoline all over himself and he set himself on fire. And people videotaped it. And that videotape of him setting himself on fire went viral. And it went viral not only in Tunisia, but all across the Middle East. And it started something called, if you remember, called the Arab Spring. And numerous governments were overthrown within just a few months. The heads of states had to flee, and many of them were overthrown all throughout the Middle East. And it all started with this one guy, Mohamed Waziri. And I share this story not because I want anybody out there to set themselves on fire, but we have powerful tools in our hands. And we see what's happening is one of the problems with that is because there are no gatekeepers, because anybody can post anything and it can go viral. Bad information, misinformation, or disinformation can go viral, right? Bad information can spread like wildfire, and it does through social media. So there's two answers to that. One is we censor, and that's one thing that's being discussed, and I don't want to get into that. But the other thing is putting out good ideas, putting out correct information. And that's what we should be encouraging our students to do, is to make sure that they have accurate information, good information, and to put that and then utilize these tools to spread good, correct information into the world. I think that's the antidote. It's going to be really hard to censor all the disinformation, but also have to teach kids how to access information and be critical thinkers about what they're digesting in terms of media. So that leads us to podcasting. And the reason why podcasting is so cool is because it requires such a small investment in equipment and a very minimal technological understanding to start, and you can get it. You could start a podcast tonight if you wanted to and have it posted by the end of the evening. Within an hour or two, you can have a podcast. It's that simple. So I'm going to take you through that. First of all, let's talk about what podcasts are. For those of you who may not be familiar, what a podcast is, essentially, it's like an audio file. People do interviews. Sometimes they tell stories. There's any kind of audio and not music though, but I mean, maybe you're playing music, but a little bit, but you can tell stories, you can interview people, you can have a show, and you record it, and then you upload that audio file to the internet, and you make it available on what are called podcatchers. The most famous one is Apple Podcasts. If you have an iPhone, you have Apple Podcasts already installed on your phone. It's like this purple icon. If you have a MacBook or an iPad, you've got Apple Podcasts probably that you can start to explore. If you have an Android device, like a Samsung phone, you can download, there's several different apps you can download, like Podcatchers, Stitcher, if you have a Spotify account, a Castbox. I think Google has Google Podcasts. So there's a lot of different podcatchers, we'll call them, that you can, download. I like Pocket Casts a lot. Spotify is cool if you're into Spotify. I know there's a whole Joe Rogan thing, controversy, but so there's options out there. So that's how you get them. Now, when I do this activity, and I'm not going to do this with you, but when I do this activity, if you introduce this to your students, if you introduce podcasting, one of the things that you can do with them is show them where they can get a podcast. Show them how they can search for a podcast, how they can download a podcast, how they subscribe to a podcast, and then have them share with each other what they find out. Obviously, you need to make this age appropriate, but with high school students, you can have them search for things. If they're into sports, what kind of sports podcasts there are out there? There's tons of them, right? And what does it mean to download, subscribe, all that stuff? I want you to, you can write this down as a to-do list of things, after we're done with this session. I want you to go to a podcast app, search for a podcast, download it, subscribe it, just kind of get yourself familiar with how you would access it as a user, because this will help you understand how to be a better producer of a podcast. The more you kind of consume podcasts and understand what it's like from the consumer end, the better you'll be from the producer end. So if you're not familiar with that, go ahead and start. And by the way, podcasts are awesome. If you have a long trip, if you have a flight, if you like to walk in the evenings, I mean, if you have an interest, there is going to be a podcast about it, and a really cool, interesting podcast. There's a lot of great content out there, no matter what you're interested in, what your interests are. So in developing a podcast, I'm going to skip this video. How I do this with students and how I would have you do this is I have a worksheet, and I will post that when I'm done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post this PDF. And when I post the PDF, you can download that PDF and use it any way you want to. You don't need to worry about getting permission from me. Just make a copy, or you can modify it however you feel like you want to modify it. But what I have students do is they complete this podcasting worksheet. And what it does is it has them come up with like a name of the work of a podcast. What's their podcast going to be about? That kind of thing. So one of the things you need to do when you decide you're going to have a podcast is there's a couple of things. One is, what is your podcast going to be about? Now, if you just want to make a podcast, make it about anything. If you want to make a podcast that's actually going to get a lot of people to listen to it, then it needs to fill a niche in the market that isn't already filled. Now, for you, it may be simple as it's your school's podcast and nobody else is doing a podcast about your high school. So you're the high school's podcast. Now you have now you're limiting your audience to only people who think that's relevant. So it's unlikely that someone in Turkey is going to care about, your particular high school, but you kind of corner the market on that particular, that information. But be thinking about it. Like if you are an arts teacher, for example, is there a art teacher podcast? And if not, that may be an area where you could have like thousands and thousands of art teachers from around the world listening to your podcast because you're one of the few that are out there. So research what's out there, figure out what you want your podcast to be, give it a name. And in the name, you don't want it to be too generic. So you wouldn't want to call it the Art Teacher Podcast. You want it to have to be indicative of what the podcast is about. But the more generic that you make it, the harder it's going to be for people to search for it. Let's take it to sports. Let's say that you wanted a sports podcast, and it was about lacrosse, right? If you do the sports podcast or lacrosse podcast, chances are there's probably dozens of other people doing that. So when a person searches for the title, they're going to see a bunch of other ones before they see yours. So give it some type of quirky name that has something to do more specifically about your podcast. So I have a podcast called Teachers Aligned. So it's about teachers, and it's about aligning with your inner life. So that's unique, Teachers Aligned. If I just call it the Teachers Podcast, nobody would ever find it. But because I called it Teachers Aligned, you type that in right now, you will find it. It'll be one of the first. If it's not the first one, it'll be one of the first 5 to 10 that you'll see. Okay, so come up with a unique name. Now the next thing is, the easiest thing you can do as a podcaster in terms of content, and this is also true of your students, is to make it a podcast where each week you're interviewing somebody. Now, interviewing skills for some people come naturally. For some people, it takes time. It's awkward. It's weird at first to become a good interviewer. And so one of the things you can do to have your students practice that, it's in the worksheet that I'm going to share with you later, is they can practice interviewing each other. So you can team them up, and they can actually record it on their phone and just do a voice memo or whatever, and record a classmate. Before they start, they just say, hey, what do you know a lot about? Well, I know a lot about video games, or I know a lot about football, or I know a lot about comic books or whatever. And say, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to ask you some questions. And then they plan out some of the questions that they're going to ask, and then they practice their interviewing skills using cell phones. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is this, and I'm going to play this video for you. This is an app called Synth, which helps your students or you to make what are called micro podcasts. So check this out.
Hi, my name is Seti, and first of all, before anything, let me just say.
So let me hold on a second. Let me see if I can get the audio to come through. Why is the audio not going through routing? Hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm like teaching about podcasting, and the audio is not coming through. Hold on. It should be coming through. All right, let's try it again.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me on your channel.
Right.
Now,
so
today I'm going to be showing everyone how to use
why
that's not coming through. And Synth is basically a platform that allows you to do bite-sized podcasting. Anyway, there's an app called Synth, both students, teachers,
I guess you can
use your own credentials if you
with
choose
Google, Twitter, whatever.
Stitching your Synth together
and
into your
basically
own flipped
it gives you the option to
participation
record
code. That means if you share this link, people can add to your podcast, and they can leave 256-second long.
They can do this right on their phone. So the students can download Synth,
and I'm looking forward to hearing
they record. You can see this how easy it is to record, but they have a very limited amount of time.
Now, synths are great because they're not only short,
episode. So this is where they can record if you don't want to do it if you want to have them turn it in. It might be easy to have them download the synth and then just share the link
back to it, or you can continue recording and
particular
add
podcast
to it.
that they create. So that's Synth. You can add like little
Let's go ahead
intros
and
stuff like that to it. So it's kind of neat.
And then take
something
out
for you to explore.
And
it also does
documents or websites that you would like
transcription.
To use. And there we go. Now, as soon as we click on
send,
this synth goes live within our podcast. Now, here I have 3 more options to make this podcast even better.
Okay, so that's Synth. I'm sorry that video is not working. All right, so that's what we do in the activities. We find a partner, we figure out what topic or issue they know well. We plan on 5 questions, and then they download the Synth app, and then find a quiet spot and take turns recording an interview with a partner. So that's what you can do with your students, or you can do it with a colleague if you want to practice your interviewing skills. One of the things about interviewing is, one of the cool things about interviewing is it's really easy to get good guests. You would be surprised if you start a podcast and you reach out to authors, especially authors who've just published a book. They're looking for opportunities to share about their book. So I've had, my podcast doesn't get it's not like it's well known. Teachers Aligned is not like some major podcast. I'm lucky if I get, a few hundred listens. I've had like Rick Hansen on. I've had Dean Ornish on. If you reach out to people, you find out the contact information of people, of authors or figures in your field that make sense for whatever your podcast is about, and reach out to them. A lot of them will say yes. Now, I mean, if you ask someone super famous, they're probably not going to say yes, but you never know. And your students can reach out, can find out the contact information or go to social media and find those people and message them. And it's really not that hard to find guests because there's a lot of people willing to, especially help students if they're creating a podcast. The other thing too that you need to do is students need to understand how to formulate the questions that they're going to ask. So one of the things, you don't want to ask yes, no questions like, hey, do you like sports? Say, what is it that you like about blah, 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 blah. They need to start to learn to ask why, how questions, and frame questions in ways where they're going to draw out better responses. And they also need to be able to adapt. So one mistake, if you're starting a podcast, one mistake people make is they plan out these questions and then they just read the questions. And no matter what the person says, when they're done, they immediately go to the next question. The best podcast hosts maybe have some questions and some data, some information that they have sort of have prepared, but they go where the conversation goes. If there's something more interesting that's brought up or a line of sort of questioning that comes up, if you treat the interview as a conversation rather than an interview, you'll end up with a better interview. You'll end up with a better product. Make it a conversation. Just make it like, if I were going to sit down and talk with this person over dinner, what would I talk to them about? What would I be curious about? And then as they start talking, they may say things that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about that. Tell me more about that. So you can always say, tell me more about that. I want to hear more about that. There's a lot of interesting questions to ask people, but listening to their responses and then playing off of that and having that natural organic conversation is going to result in a product where people want to listen a little bit more because it doesn't sound stilted. Let's get into the equipment. So if you don't have a lot of money, all you need is a cell phone or a computer. Okay. That's all you need to get started. And you can record on your cell phone, record on your computer. You can create the graphic for it using Canva or something like that. And you can get it published with an app like Anchor. And I'll explain Anchor in just a minute. If you've got a budget though, if you've got a little bit of budget, it helps to invest in a quality microphone. I am speaking to you through a Shure SM58 microphone, which is $100 microphone. It's plugged in. It has a pop filter on it. It's on a mic stand. I have headphones on. I have an audio interface that I'm going to share with you that has a built-in mixer. Okay, so those are some things you can purchase. You can get a USB microphone, which has kind of everything built into it to sound. It'll help the sound of your voice, be professional. You can buy a USB microphone for anywhere from $100 to $150. You can buy portable microphones. So if you want your students to go around to like a football game or to a orchestra concert or somewhere where they're going to be like on the go recording, you can get like a portable microphone for anywhere from like $100 to $400. They can record directly into these microphones and get a really good quality sounding recording that they can then upload to a computer and edit and post. Pop filters are cheap. They just go over the mic. They help what are called plosions. So when you say P's and T's and words that have hard consonant sounds, if you don't have the pop filter on, that can be kind of hard to listen to. Mic stands. I got my mic stand, I think it was about $25 on Amazon. It came with exactly what you're seeing here. It can clamp onto a student desk, clamp onto a table that you have in your classroom. This is really helpful because when you're doing a podcast, you want to have your hands free. And if you're holding a microphone, now you only have one hand to like be typing or to be, you know, handling other things. So this is a good investment. What I've done at a school before is I've invested in 4 of these. I've invested in 4 mics, 4 mic stands, the cables that go with them, and then an interface. And I'll show you what that interface looks like in a minute. You don't need a shock mount, but shock mounts help in case like someone pounds the table, you don't hear a sudden vibration. And then headphones are something that you're going to want, especially if you've got multiple people recording. Say you've got 3 or 4 kids around a table and they're recording a conversation or an interview. You want to have the headphones on so everybody can hear clearly what everybody else is saying. There's no feedback or anything like that. Audio interfaces, the one you see here is called a Scarlett 4x4. I think it allows 4 inputs. That one costs maybe around $200 or $300. I'm not sure. You can get an audio mixer if you need it. This is a podcast bundle from Tascam. The last time I saw it, I think it was like around $200 or $300. It came with like the mics and the headphones and a little mixer and that kind of thing. If you don't have money, you're like, hey, Todd, I'd like to do that, but I don't have like $500 to invest or $1,000 in a podcast setup. Go to donorschoose.org, set up an account there if you don't have one already, and then go to your Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and just share with people, hey, I'm trying to raise money to do podcasting with my kids. And see if you can get it funded that way. Ask your administration, ask your PTSO, ask around, find people. If you're doing a sports podcast for your school, whoever's got banners on your football field, whoever's got ads if you have a school newspaper or ads anywhere, like in your yearbook or whatever, those people might be willing to sponsor a podcast. Say, hey, I'll give you a few $100 and you just shout us out like in each episode. So there's ways to get funding. I'm going to skip this video so I can get to the software, and I'm going to show you how I have things set up in a minute. So if you have a MacBook or an iMac or whatever in your classroom, then you've got GarageBand already built in, and that is software you can use to record and edit podcasts. A more expensive thing for Apple products is Logic Pro. You really don't need that, okay, to do this with students. GarageBand is great. It's a wonderful thing. It's got free loops in there, so you can kind of add music. It's got sound effects. It's got all kinds of stuff. And by the way, you don't have to just do interviews. Students can write stories, create stories, and do sound effects and do all kinds of cool stuff. And play characters that they create and do like little episodes of a series. So they can do, here's episode 1 of our story that we're creating. And there's different characters and those characters have voices and, you can do the little sound effects and stuff. So there's a lot of fun that you can have. Another thing that I did with students is, and this is semi-related, is I had students who were really into hip hop music and using GarageBand and some of these other, applications, they can create their own original hip hop music using loops and samples and things like that, and record their own original music. So we did that quite a bit. On a PC, so if you've got a Dell or whatever, you can download a free program called Audacity, or you can use Adobe's Audition program, which is a upgraded type of software. So there's different types of software. Again, you don't need the software. In fact, I'm going to show you how I record mine, and I don't edit it. I don't edit my podcast at all. I just record it straight, one shot, and then I upload it and I'm done. So you don't have to edit, but this is an option if you do, if you want to edit it, if your students want to edit it. If you're doing interviews, I highly recommend using Zoom or Google Meet. This is why it's easy to get people to interview, because all you got to do is send them a Zoom link. You can use Skype. There's a couple of different ways you can do interviews, and then publishing your podcast. So I haven't found anything better. I'm not being paid. I'm not a sponsor for Anchor. I haven't found anything better than Anchor. Anchor.fm is a product put out by Spotify, and it is just super easy to use. And there's SoundCloud and some other things, but I highly recommend Anchor because it's easy to upload your podcast. You can actually record straight into the application. And then it's just easy to set up your episodes. And then what's cool about it is they automatically handle something called RSS feed for you. The RSS feed, really simple syndication, is what that stands for. And it used to be you had to submit your RSS feed to all the podcatchers for it to work, but Anchor takes all of that and does all that for you. So I'm going to show you. Let me share my screen again and sort of show you what I'm talking about here. Give me just a minute. So here's Anchor. So the SCEA movement is a podcast we do at the SCEA once a month with my colleague Albert Jones, and you can see this is what the Anchor dashboard looks like. You can kind of see where your listeners are from, what they're listening, how they're listening, what their gender is, what their age is, all that stuff. But we're going to jump into if I wanted to do a new episode. So if I wanted to create a new episode in Anchor, and by the way, you can download this for your phone, and it works very similarly. I'm showing you the desktop version, but the phone version works almost exactly the same. So you can go in here and you can record. So your students can get on their phones or get on a computer and click record and capture the audio straight from their device, right? And then when they do that, so it'll let me record. So blah, 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 blah. Hi, welcome to the, Thomas High School podcast. I'm Todd. How are you guys doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I stop recording. Now I've got that recording right there. And if I want to add that to my episode, I just click once it's done processing, I just add this button, click the add button, and it's over there. Now, and it's going to be part of that episode. Now I can go to my library. I can use previously recorded or uploaded audio. I can go into music. And if I have a Spotify account, I can add Spotify music. And the other cool thing is if I share this link with people, I can send that link out to parents, to other students, to the community, and they can record responses. So I can say, hey, what do you think about the football team this year? What do you think about the orchestra this year? Whatever. And you send them that link, and then they record it. Then you can go in here, and if you like what someone recorded from their phone, you can add that to your episode. And then there's all these transitional music things that you can add as well. Then you just click save episode, and your episode's done. It's that simple. Or you can upload your episodes as well. So going back to, I'm going to click new episode again. So over here is where I would, if I recorded an episode, okay, so if I recorded it on a device or whatever, I'll show you how I do mine in a minute. But if I record my episode and I have it on an SD card or I have it on a portable recorder, I can just upload those files straight from that device or straight from my computer if I've transferred it to my computer. And then once you, so let's see if it'll let me this. All right, there we go. So under podcast setting, there's where you're going to give it the name, your description. You can upload your cover, what's called cover art there. And and your students can create that. If you don't know what Canva is, you should check that out. I probably should do another session on that. Canva. If you have Photoshop, if you have Adobe Photoshop, you can use that. Probably they can do it in Paint or whatever, but your students probably know how to create stuff. But you can even take a picture and upload that as your cover art. And then you decide what your category is, your language, and different account settings. And then give it a custom URL if you want. Give it a custom color if you want, like your school's colors. Like if your school's color is red, you can put red there. You can make it a red color. And then whatever connections you want in terms of your social media. So whatever accounts are connected, like if you want to connect your Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, you can do that there. Easy setup, right? That's super easy to set up. Everybody can do that. And then your podcast availability. This is the magic of Anchor. They are the ones, once you publish your first episode, they're going to propagate it out to all the podcatchers. So mine is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Amazon, Castbox, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Stitcher, and by Spotify by default, because Anchor is a Spotify company, subsidiary, I think, of Spotify. Okay, so simple, right? That's really simple stuff right there. Easy peasy to make a podcast. And again, you could download this on your phone right now. Download the Anchor app on your phone, and you can record on your phone. Like you can literally go into your phone just like this and record an episode. If you have somebody, you go to a conference and there's a really cool speaker and you want to record an interview with them, you can do it right there. Like literally record the episode on the Anchor app on your phone. It's so super simple. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you my setup. So this is I'm going to pull my camera off my laptop. I'm going to show you how I have things set up, so you get a feel for like how I would recommend you do a setup at home, and then you can just sort of modify this with your students. So here we go. Hopefully you guys won't get nauseous doing this. All right, here we go. So you can see the mic. I have the mic here, and then I have a cable. It's an XLR cable out, and then I have something here called a Roadcaster. It's made by a company called Rode, RODE, right there. This thing, the last time I checked, costs about $500, and I realized you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. But I can promise you that if you're willing to put the money into this device, and again, I don't get any commission from Rode, if you put the money into this, it is highly worth it, because it makes the production sound really good, and it makes it so much easier in terms, you don't really have to edit. You can do so many cool things. Let me just kind of go through what you can do. First of all, it's got 4 inputs. So you can put up to 4 different mics in it. The mics go right in the back here, plug in 1, 2, 3, 4, your XLR cable. XLR is like, there's the 3-prong cables like you see probably in your church or at a conference center or whatever. XLR cables. Then it's got a USB input. So you can, right now, I have my computer plugged in. I don't know why it's not playing the video, but anyway, you can record straight from a USB device, then from a cell phone. So you can plug your cell phone if you're doing a phone call interview, and then that blue light, you can't see it, but there's a Bluetooth icon there, and you can hook up any Bluetooth device to that particular audio control. And then over here, you have a bank of 8 sort of instant audio. So I'll give you an example. Hopefully it'll play. So this is the music that you're hearing is the intro to the SCEA movement podcast. And what you do is you can connect this Roadcaster Pro to your laptop, and you can drag and drop any audio clips into these 8 banks, and then you press them, and that automatically starts. So I can start my intro music and say, hey, hi, everybody. Welcome to the SCEA movement. I'm Todd Scholl. And today we have a really great episode, blah, 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 blah. And then I could fade that out. And then and then I can bring either the cell phone or the Bluetooth device or whatever. Or if I have someone in the studio and they have a mic up, I can put their mic up and so forth. So the cool thing about this is you can put anything into these 8 spots. So it could be sound effects. It could be audio clips, like little bits of interviews that you've already done with different people. Okay. So that these sort of pads can be, you can load in any audio into these so that you can instantaneously bring them up. Okay. Then in the back, you'll see there's 4 outputs for your headphones. That's, by the way, that's the cell phone input right there. You get your 4 outputs for your headphones. So what you could do in a school setting, this is what I would recommend, is you get the Roadcaster, then you get 4 of these mics, which are XLR mics, and I'll show you that you can sort of see what this is like. Just a typical mic that you have in your auditorium, right? XLR mic. I like the Shure SM58s. That's like an industry standard. Then you can get one of these. You can get 4 of those, and then 4 of these mic stands, and those are about $25 each. They clip right onto the table, and then you can put them, or you can create a little studio for yourself in your classroom, and you can plug in those 4 mics right into the back, and then 4 sets of headphones, and then your students can record. Now, how do you record? Well, back here, you can see right there, there's a micro SD slot. So the same type of micro SD cards that go into your phones, into other devices, cameras. That micro SD card, you just pop it in there, and then when ready, you hit the record button. You just hit this record button, and you record directly onto the SD card. Then when you're done, you pop the SD card out and you put it into an SD card reader, or you pop it into your whatever you like. I've got for my MacBook, I'll show you real quick. For my MacBook, this is what it looks like. I've got this little thing that plugs in to the micro for the USB-C port. And then there's my SD adapter with the micro SD card in it. So I take that SD card out. Sorry, the micro SD card out. And I'm going to place it back here into that micro SD card slot. Right? And now you'll notice that light went from blue to green. And then if I hit record here, it's recording it. And I can see the time of it. I can see all of my audio settings. And then when I'm done, I hit record again, and it's done. Pop out that micro SD card, put it back into the adapter, and that's what I upload to Anchor. I'll go over, open my Anchor app, upload that audio file to the Anchor app, put in the name of the podcast episode. If I've got a picture of the person that I've interviewed, that's the podcast art. Put in a description, any links that I want in there, and then hit publish, and Anchor does all the rest. And usually within an hour or 2, it's available on all the podcatchers like Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all that. So it's available for everybody at that point. And I just see why the audio wasn't working, because of the mute button. I accidentally hit the mute button earlier. There you go. The fun of technology. So that is called the Roadcaster Pro. The other cool thing about it is it has audio effects and vocal processors on it that are going to make the voices sound really good, crisp and clean, and just of high quality. So you don't have to have something like this to get started, but if you have some money, or you can get this on a donor's choose thing, or convince somebody to purchase this for you, you can set up your own little studio, and it's well worth the investment in terms of creativity and the ability to make something that sounds really professional and that doesn't require a ton of editing. You have to forgive me as I put my camera back. Okay, so that is that's my setup. Now, couple of other things that you may want to try, and then I'm going to check for comments. So, couple of other things you may want to try. One is if you have a website, or your students are building websites using like Weebly, Wix, or Squarespace. I liked Weebly because it's really, really easy. But Wix and Squarespace, to me, the websites look a little bit better. There's just the learning curve's a little bit steeper, but your kids probably can figure it out. But what's cool is once you have that Anchor, once you have an Anchor episode set up and a podcast set up, you can actually get the embed code from Anchor, copy and paste that into your website, and then your podcast can be on the website that your students are building. So thinking about this like as a journalism project, for example, your students can create a website, create all this cool content to put on there. They could do some writing, they could do some videos or vlogging, whatever, and then you can create your own YouTube channel, have social media stuff. So there's so many cool ways to teach kids. Going back to what I said earlier about Sophie Scholl, how to use their voice. Because if we're not teaching them how to do this, what ends up happening is by default, they're just like learning that using your voice means doing a silly dance on TikTok and uploading it and trying to get a bunch of views for it. Nothing wrong. I'm not judging that, but we should be helping kids see that in 2022, there are ways to use your voice that are powerful. They're really powerful, and not just about entertainment, but about creating a better world. But another thing you can consider doing is live streaming events. So obviously you're watching this. If you're watching this, probably through Facebook Live. So that is something you can do. That's really scary to do with kids, but and YouTube also has a feature you can broadcast, and I think Twitter still has Periscope. And so the main thing that I want you to take away from this is, if you're an educator and you want to start a podcast, let's say there's something that you really care about, the arts or music, or whatever, you can start your podcast today. You don't need to go out and buy equipment. All you need is a computer or your cell phone. If you're working with students, same thing. They can start a podcast tomorrow. You can work with them tomorrow to start it. If you want it to be done well, it helps to have a little bit of money, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to buy some equipment that you're going to need. I would say $1,000, you can get pretty much every single thing that you need to do a really great sounding podcast, and to set up a little podcast studio in your school, which isn't that much when you consider the fact that what the students are going to be able to do with that. So I am going to go and look and see if there are any questions that have been posted. And so bear with me while I do that. Let's see what we got here. All right, we got some comments. I don't see any questions yet. Okay, so someone could hear it. I just couldn't hear it myself. Can we get some sort of Google Doc? So Janine, I am going to post into the comments some documents, some PDFs. So I will be posting the PDFs that I use, and this will help you. Everybody's free to take those and use them, modify them to whatever you want to do, and share them with colleagues as well. So that was the only question that I have seen so far. So I guess that's going to probably wrap it up. I want to leave you with this. We live in a world. We have a tendency, I think, when I was teaching, I fought against this mindset. We have a tendency to value reading and writing over other forms of communication. And I'm certainly not discounting that. Reading and writing are fundamental skills that our students need. But as we move further and further into the future, students have to be able to need to learn how to articulate themselves, how to create visual and audio content as well. Because those that are doing the most influencing, I think, are doing so using video and audio content. Now, that doesn't mean that writers have amazing influence, and we should be teaching that as well. We also students need to be able to read content, but students need to be able to watch content and listen to content and be critical consumers of that, because that's what's happening is that people are going onto YouTube, people are listening to podcasts, and they're taking this information and they're not using critical reasoning skills to determine, hey, maybe I need to research that. Maybe this person doesn't know what they're talking about. Like, who is this person that they're interviewing? What authority do they have? What knowledge and what background do they have? So students need practice in our classrooms, not just reading material, but listening to material, watching material, and being able to do that critically and make sure they understand it, but also make sure that they're able to kind of filter out the nonsense and know what's credible. But then they also need the ability to create that content, right? So being able to write is important. Being able to make a video, make a podcast, make that type of content is really powerful now. It's really powerful. Back when Sophie Scholl was, speaking out against Nazis, she didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have a video camera. She didn't have a way to blog. She didn't have a lot of these resources, right? She just had a typewriter and the ability to make copies and stamps. And we live in a different world. And our standards and the content of our classrooms needs to be in alignment with what our students are going to be experiencing as they move into their future. And if we're only teaching them to read, write, if that's the only thing they're learning, they're missing out on important skills of taking in information that's in video and audio format and being able to deliver video and audio format communication. Podcasting is a cheap and easy way to get them started with the audio portion of it. And then they can move into videos and all kinds of really cool content. And again, one more connection to make, and then I'll sign off. If a student is only making a piece of content for you to grade in return, the motivation is going to be different than a student who's creating content for potentially the world. And if you can make those types of connections in your classrooms, where the students now see themselves as creators of not just something that's for a grade, that's something that can change the world, that can maybe be a positive influence on their community or their country or their world. How powerful is that? Now, what kind of motivation does a student have to pour themselves into that assignment? So make those connections, use the power of these tools, use social media to spread the cool stuff that those students are doing. This increases transparency. It helps our communities and our parents understand what's going on in our classrooms. And invite your parents to participate in it as well. Because like if you do the thing in Anchorfm, they can be on your podcasts as well. What an amazing time we live in. I remember when I was young and I dreamed about being a DJ on the radio, and I wound up getting to do that when I was 18. But somebody else had to give me permission to get in front of a microphone and to broadcast. And now nobody needs to give you or your students any permission in terms of getting behind a microphone and broadcasting, not just to like where the FM signal can go, but where the internet can go, which is everywhere. So I hope that you guys will consider doing that. If you have any questions, check the comments. I'm going to put some resources in the comments. If you have any questions, you can reach me at toddscholl@gmail.com. As always, I want to thank the SCEA for sponsoring tonight's session. I would love to have you as a part of this movement. And I mean this, I want to speak to you very sincerely. If we work together collectively, we can make a change. It's very hard to do that individually. We have to work together. And I believe firmly at the SCEA and our values can move South Carolina in a really positive direction. But we need you. We need all hands on board. And if you want to join us, just head on over to jointhescea.org. That's jointhescea.org. If you have any questions about joining, you can email me. You can respond here. We would love to have you. And we would love to have your leadership. And we'd love to have your voice. If you have a webinar you'd like to do, or a blog post that you'd like to share, or a podcast or whatever, reach out to me, because we're always looking for people who want to share their passion about education. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Coming up next week, I think it's March 30th, my good friend Tisha Smalls Brown is going to be doing a live stream, and hers is called The Inner Work. She's phenomenal educator from Charleston. You're going to definitely not want to miss that. That's March 30th from 7 to 8. And March 31st from 7 to 8, I'm going to be doing a session on Flipgrid. I needed to reschedule that due to a flight delay. So that'll be March 31st. And a little teaser, we're going to do a retreat June 28th through 30th, an educator renewal retreat in Old Fort, North Carolina at Indigo Retreat Center. Beautiful, beautiful place. A very limited number of people will be allowed to go, very affordable. And I'll be posting information about that very soon. So look out for that on the SCEA's Facebook channel and the SCEA movement, the SCEAmovement.org. Okay, I will post everything else into the comments, and you guys have a great night, and take care.